I used to think the most dangerous man in the room was the one with the loudest voice. I was wrong. The most dangerous person is the one everyone assumes is invisible. As I sat in the back of the charcoal gray Maybach, the leather smelling of forced luxury and Peter's expensive cologne, I felt his hand pat mine. It wasn't an affectionate gesture. It was the way you'd pat a golden retriever to make sure it stayed seated. "Remember, Jen," Peter said, not looking at me as he adjusted his silk tie in the vanity mirror. "These guys from Sato Industries are old school. Very traditional. You're there to be the garnish on the plate. Look expensive, smile when I laugh. And for heaven's sake, don't mention your Save the World charity work. It makes you sound small time." I smoothed the fabric of my Dior dress, a dress he'd bought me specifically for tonight. He thought he was dressing as a doll. He didn't realize he was arming an operative. "I understand, Peter," I said, my voice soft, hovering at a pitch that suggested I had nothing of substance to contribute. "Just be the garnish." He smirked, a jagged, arrogant expression that had probably fooled dozens of boards of directors. "Exactly. I've spent 3 years learning Japanese just to bury these guys. Tonight I close the deal, and tomorrow I own the Tokyo skyline. Just don't get in the way of the big boy talk." The restaurant was Onyx, the kind of place where you don't get a table unless your net worth has at least 9 zeros. We were ushered into a private washitsu room with tatami mats and sliding paper doors. Mr. Sato and his 2 associates were already there, standing like statues. They bowed deeply. Peter gave a curt, shallow nod the first. Mistake of an amateur who thinks power is shown through disrespect. The server brought the first course, a delicate sea bream. Peter didn't even wait for the tea to be poured before he started. He turned to Mr. Sato, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. Then he began to speak in Japanese. His tone was smooth, but his eyes stayed on me, mocking me while he addressed them. "I apologize for bringing her," Peter said in Japanese, his voice dripping with feigned embarrassment. "She's quite a beauty, isn't she? But unfortunately, the brain doesn't match the face. I have to keep her around for the aesthetic value, you understand. She thinks we're here to talk about a partnership. She has no idea I'm actually here to strip your company's assets and sell them to the highest bidder by Tuesday." Mr. Sato's expression didn't flinch, but his eyes shifted to me for a fraction of a second. I kept my gaze focused on my chopsticks, my hands perfectly still. My heart was thundering against my ribs, but my face was a mask of blissful ignorance. Peter laughed, a loud, booming sound that felt like a slap in the quiet room. He patted my thigh under the table. "I was just telling them how much you like the decor. Honey," he said to me in English, his smile bright and fake. "It's lovely, Peter," I replied, tilting my head slightly. "So peaceful." Peter turned back to Sato, his smile curdling into something sharper. He leaned in, continuing in Japanese. "Look at her. I could tell her I'm bankrupting her family tonight, and she'd just thank me for the wine. That's the problem with these Western girls, no depth. Just like your company's current valuation. Sato-san, shallow, fragile, ready to be broken." He thought he was a lion in a cage of sheep. He didn't realize that the sheepfold was empty, and I was the one holding the key to the gate. The air in the room felt like it was thickening, turning into a physical weight. Peter was high on his own perceived brilliance, his Japanese becoming faster and more aggressive as the sake flowed. He was certain he was the only bridge between 2 worlds, never suspecting the bridge was actually a trapdoor. "You're doing great, Jen," Peter whispered in English, leaning toward me while the waiter replaced our plates. "Sato is folding. I can see it in his eyes. He's terrified." I nodded, offering a shy, supportive smile. "You always know exactly what to say, Peter." He turned back to the men, his face snapping instantly into a mask of corporate dominance. "As I was saying," he continued in Japanese, his tone condescending, "the merger terms are non-negotiable. My firm takes 60% of the intellectual property rights. If you don't sign the letter of intent tonight, I'll leak the news of your liquidity issues to the press. By morning, your stock will be worth less than this napkin." Mr. Sato remained silent, his gaze fixed on a small ceramic bowl. One of his associates started to speak, his voice trembling slightly, but Peter cut him off with a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. "Don't bother," Peter barked in Japanese. "I don't negotiate with subordinates. I've already bought the silence of your board members. This is a funeral, not a meeting." I felt a cold shiver of disgust. He wasn't just a bully. He was a predator who had spent months engineering a hostile takeover from the inside. But what Peter didn't know was that Sato Industries had a silent partner, a firm that specialized in corporate hygiene, cleaning, out the rot before it could spread. Peter, I said softly, touching his arm. I'm so sorry, I think I left my phone in the car. Could I get the spare key? He sighed, rolling his eyes at Mr. Sato as if to say, see? I told you she was useless. He fished the key fob out of his pocket and slid it across the table. Don't be long. We're about to make history. I won't, I promised. I stepped out of the room, the sliding door clicking shut behind me. The moment I was in the hallway, the docile girlfriend mask dissolved. My posture straightened and my stride became purposeful. I didn't go to the car. I walked to the end of the dim corridor where a man in a sharp black suit was waiting, near the service entrance. Jennifer, he whispered. He's more arrogant than the profile suggested, I said, my voice now crisp and authoritative. He just admitted to bribing the board members. It's all on the wire. Did you get the trace on the offshore accounts he mentioned? He handed me a sleek, ultra-thin tablet. Everything is there. He's been funneling Sato's R&D funds into a shell company in the Caymans for 6 months. He thinks he's using this merger to hide the hole in his own books. I scrolled through the data. It was all there. Peter wasn't the billionaire he claimed to be. He was a man standing on a collapsing house of cards, trying to steal a Japanese pillar to prop it up. Tell the legal team to stand by, I said, handing the tablet back. And notify the SEC, I'm going back in to finish this. You want us to move in now? No, I said, a small cold smile touching my lips. I want him to think he's won first. The fall is longer that way. I took a deep breath, reset my features into that look of vacant prettiness, and headed back toward the room. As I reached the door, I heard Peter's voice through the thin paper walls laughing. And once the papers are signed, he told the Japanese executives, I'll have her packed and gone by the end of the week. She served her purpose. Just like you? I slid the door open. Found it, I said brightly, holding up my phone. Peter didn't even look at me. He was pushing a fountain pen toward Mr. Sato. Come on. Kenji, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Sign the paper. The trap was set. Now I just had to spring it. The silence in the room was heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. Peter was leaning so far over the table he was practically in Mr. Sato's personal space. He clicked the fountain pen, a gold-plated thing that cost more than most people's cars, and held it out like a weapon. Last chance, Sato-san, Peter said in English, his voice a low, threatening purr. Sign, and you keep your title. Refuse, and I'll spend every cent I have making sure you're remembered as the man who destroyed a 100-year-old legacy. Mr. Sato looked at the pen, then at me. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, not fear, but a weary kind of patience. Peter turned to me, his face twisted in a smirk. In Japanese, he muttered, Watch this, Jennifer. This is how you break a man's spirit. It's almost a shame he doesn't have a daughter as pretty as you. I'd take her as part of the commission, too. That was it. That was the line. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. Instead, I slowly reached out and picked up the gold-plated pen from Peter's hand. You're right about one thing, Peter, I said. My voice wasn't soft anymore. It was cold, precise, and I spoke in the most formal, high-level Keigo Japanese used only in the highest halls of government and law. The legacy of Sato Industries is indeed 100 years old. It is a tragedy that you thought it could be dismantled by a man who can't even balance his own shell. Company's ledger. The pen clicked shut in my hand. The sound was like a gunshot. Peter froze. His neck turned a blotchy, violent red. He stared at me, his mouth hanging open as if his brain had physically unplugged from his body. What, Jen, what the hell was that? I ignored him, turning my full attention to Mr. Sato. I bowed, a perfect 45-degree angle that reflected a lifetime of cultural understanding. Sato-san, I apologize for the delay, I continued in Japanese. As the senior lead auditor for the Global Ethics Commission, I have seen enough. The bribery of your board members has been intercepted. The offshore accounts in the Caymans have been flagged for seizure. And as for Mr. Peter Collins, I turned my head slowly to look at Peter. He no longer has the authority to sign a grocery list, let alone a merger. Peter scrambled back, his chair screeching against the floor. You speak Japanese? You've been sitting there this whole time, listening to you call me a garnish? I finished for him, switching back to English. My voice was steady, cutting through his rising panic. Listening to you admit to securities fraud, racketeering, and extortion? Yes, Peter, I heard every word. and so did the two agents currently standing outside that door. "You set me up," he roared, slamming his fist on the table. The sake cups rattled. This was a sting. "You're nothing but a—" "I'm the person who just saved this merger," I interrupted, standing up. I looked down at him, and for the first time in our relationship, he looked small. Sato Industries is a brilliant company. They just needed to find a partner who wasn't a criminal. They found one. It just isn't you. Mr. Sato stood up then, his face finally breaking into a small, respectful smile. He bowed to me, not a polite nod, but a deep bow of gratitude. "Thank you, Agent," Sato said. "We were told the ghost was the best." We were not disappointed. Peter's face went from red to a ghostly, translucent white. He looked at the contract, then at me, then at the door. He was a man realizing that the quiet girl hadn't just been a witness to his crimes, she had been his judge. The sliding door didn't just open. It was an intrusion. The two men who entered didn't wear the colorful yukatas of the restaurant staff. They wore the charcoal wool of federal enforcement, the kind of suits that don't need a name tag to tell you they have the power to ruin your life. "Peter Collins?" the lead agent asked. His voice was like a gavel striking a desk. Peter looked up, his face a confused mosaic of rage and terror. He was still clutching the gold-plated fountain pen, the nib hovering inches away from a contract that was now worth less than the air it occupied. "What is this?" "I'm in the middle of a multi-billion-dollar closing." "Get out!" I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just watched him the way a scientist watches a chemical reaction reach its inevitable volatile end. "The closing is over, Peter," I said. My voice was a calm, steady anchor in the storm of his panic. I spoke in English now, making sure every syllable landed with the weight of a stone. "Actually, it never even started. Mr. Sato knew who you were before you even landed at Narita. He just needed me to confirm the intent." Peter's head snapped toward me. The blotchy red on his neck was turning a sickly purple. You're with them? Internal affairs?" He laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that grated against the zen silence of the room. "You're a nonprofit consultant. I checked your background. I saw your tax returns. You saw what I wanted you to see." "Peter," I replied, leaning back and crossing my legs. "In my line of work, we call that a front. And your due diligence was as shallow as your Japanese grammar." The agent stepped forward. One of them produced a pair of stainless steel handcuffs. The sound of the metal ratcheting open was the most honest thing Peter had heard all night. "Peter Collins, you are under arrest for securities fraud, the unauthorized sale of intellectual property, and attempted extortion," the agent recited. Peter scrambled back, his chair catching on the edge of the tatami mat and flipping over. He ended up on the floor, the great negotiator reduced to a man scrambling in the dirt. He looked at Mr. Sato, his eyes wide and pleading. "Sato-san, tell them! We have a deal. I can fix the liquidity issues, I swear." Mr. Sato didn't even look at him. He stood up slowly, adjusted his kimono, and turned to me. He ignored Peter as if he were a stain on the rug that the cleaning crew would deal with shortly. "Jennifer-san," Sato said, his Japanese deep and resonant. "It is a rare thing to see a shark caught by a pearl. You have saved my family's honor tonight. For that, we are in your debt." "The honor was already yours, Sato-san," I replied, standing to meet his bow. I simply pulled back the curtain so the world could see the thief standing behind it. The departure. As the agents hauled Peter to his feet, he turned back to me one last time. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, naked hatred. "I'll be out by morning, Jen. I have the best lawyers in the city. And when I'm out, I'm coming for you." I walked toward him, stopping just inches from his face. I didn't flinch at his shadow. I reached out and gently plucked the gold fountain pen from his trembling hand. "You don't have lawyers anymore." "Peter," I whispered, so low only he could hear. "The firm's retainer was paid from the accounts I just froze. You're going to a public defender. And honestly, I think he'll find your Japanese just as annoying as I did." I turned my back on him. The agents led him out, his protests fading into the distance until the only sound left was the trickle of the water, feature in the hallway. I stayed in the room for a moment after everyone left. The tea was cold. The sea bream was untouched. The silence was absolute. I picked up my phone, the real one, and sent a 3-word message to my director. "Asset neutralized, homebound." I walked out of Onyx, passing the shocked hostess who had seen Peter dragged out in cuffs. I stepped into the night. Tokyo was alive, a neon jungle of a million stories, and tonight, I had written the final chapter of a very bad one. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. Not a Maybach. Not a showpiece. Just a quiet, powerful car that blended into the shadows. I got in, and as we pulled away, I watched the restaurant disappear in the rearview mirror. Peter had called me a garnish. He'd called me arm candy. He'd treated me like a decorative object with no voice. But that was his fatal flaw. He forgot that in the dark, the garnish is the only thing that knows exactly what's happening in the kitchen. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt like someone who had finally finished a very long, very loud chore. "Hungry, Jen?" my driver asked. "Starving," I said. "And drive fast. I've had enough fine dining to last me a lifetime."